You know, when you said you wanted to deep dive into Myrtle Beach, well, it got me thinking. I mean, everybody thinks they know this place, right? Sun, sand, that boardwalk. But we're going to go way beyond the beach blanket today. What do you think?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. Myrtle Beach kind of knows that too. Like this YouTube travel show episode,
Yeah.
right? And the background stuff we got, they really show how they're trying to diversify,
Yeah.
become a place that even history buffs and foodies would want to check out, not just beach bums.
Right. Like, come for the beach, stay for everything else. And speaking of everything else, Brook Green Gardens. Seriously, this one blew my mind a little. You're telling me it's a museum, a zoo, and a National Historic Site all in one? That's kind of a power move.
Totally. Makes you rethink what a garden can be.
Hmm.
And the fact that it got that historical title, the designation, because of all the sculptures by women,
Yeah.
it just adds this whole other level to it.
And not just any woman. The founder, Anna Huntington, was a sculptor herself. That's really putting your passion out there. It makes you think about how these places really become these testaments to what people cared about?
It's like living history. And speaking of connecting the past and the present, the show mentioned how Brook Green Gardens is a big part of the community. Events, education programs, the whole bit. It's not just a tourist trap, it's part of the place. You know what I mean?
Doing this deep dive, it's really a recurring thing. That whole balance between keeping what makes a place special and also, like, moving with the times. And speaking of special,
Mm.
we got to talk about some of the characters in this episode.
Oh, I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Bubble Love, come on. You can't just, like, make this stuff up. The unofficial mayor of Merle's Inlet.
With the catchphrase and everything, it really got me wondering, do you think these places, search for these local characters, or do they just kind of happen?
That's a good question. Honestly, probably a little of both. But you're right, those people become so important to what a place feels like, even if they're not in the official travel brochures.
It's true. And speaking of things that give a place its flavor, the show jumped from Bubble Love right into Carolina Shag dancing, which, as we all know, is practically its own language down there.
So true. And watching those different generations dancing together, it hit me how much dance can be this, like, connecting thread
Hmm.
between generations. It's almost like a history of the Carolina coast, but told through movement and music, of course. It made me want to learn how to shag, I'll tell you that. And speaking of things that make me hungry, let's talk about the food. This YouTube episode, the one we're deep diving into, it didn't just show us around. It like took us straight to the good stuff to
Right.
try the local flavor. And man, my mouth is watering just thinking about this fish chowder they
Oh,
showed.
you mean the one from the Caledonia Golf and Fish Club? Yeah, yeah, I read about that. I think it was like a recipe the chef made just for the golfers.
Exactly. Like, hey, you've made the turn. Time to treat yourself to this amazing chowder.
It's so classic Myrtle Beach, isn't it? I mean, you've got the golf, the fresh seafood, that whole vibe.
It just shows you how food traditions get started, right? Like often in really specific communities and kind of by accident too. Who would have thought a golf course would be the home of like legendary fish chowder? But hey, here we are. And then just because this episode was all about finding those unexpected things, they took us from like a super down home chowder to get this, a $3,700 cognac at this really fancy father-son bar 1912.
Wow. Talk about a swing.
Yeah.
From casual golfer food to a drink that probably costs more than my first car.
Right. But it's not really about the price, is it? It's more like how travel can show us these wild experiences, things we'd never see in our everyday lives. Got me thinking about how some people collect stamps, right? Or coins. But others collect those crazy
Oh,
experiences.
totally. You know that saying, collect moments, not things? This is like that. And yeah, some of those moments, like sipping on some super rare cognac served in, Baccarat Crystal, come with a pretty hefty price tag.
Yeah. Speaking of memorable, this episode also like unearthed this little mystery. Atalaya, the abandoned seaside castle. That place has that whole haunting beauty thing going on.
And a super interesting history, too. You remember Anna Huntington, who started Brook Green Gardens? Well, Atalaya was her and her husband's winter home. Apparently, she had tuberculosis, and her doctor was like, hey, maybe a warmer climate would help. So they hired 100 people in the middle of the Depression to build this amazing estate.
Wow. That's incredible. From a tuberculosis diagnosis to this sign of hope during a really tough time. It's amazing how one place can hold so much history. And it's not just stuff in the past either, is it? It's part of the state park now. They do this big arts and crafts festival there every year too.
It's like what we were saying before about Myrtle Beach. That balance between honoring its history And also, being part of the present, too. They could have easily let Adlaya just fall apart. But instead, they made it a place people can visit and enjoy. It's pretty cool.
Which actually leads perfectly into our next discovery, don't you think? Because this episode took us to a spot that's classic Myrtle Beach and something totally new at the same time. Like, get this, they took us to the Grand Strand Brewery, which you might think, okay, just another brewery, right? But it's actually a bigger story about, like, bringing that whole area back to life.
Yeah. They took this kind of rundown part of town and were like, let's make this awesome.
Right. And you see that everywhere these days, right? Fixing up old neighborhoods, bringing in those cool local businesses.
Yeah, the whole craft brewery thing is really blown up, hasn't it?
Oh, it's that think globally, drink locally idea in action. But it's not just a fresh coat of paint, They're really trying to do something unique. And speaking of unique, did you know that mini golf is like a way of life in Myrtle Beach?
Oh, totally. It's more than mini golf. It's got that nostalgic thing,
Yeah.
that kitschy vibe people love. But then there's also a whole other level to it.
Oh, absolutely. This episode showed some of these pro mini golf tournaments, and these people were serious. It really made me wonder, what is it about those games, the ones that seem so simple that really grabs people?
It's like they say, easy to learn, hard to master. You've got skill, strategy, even a little bit of luck all playing a part. So it's no wonder it's become such a big thing.
It reminds you that you can find those surprises anywhere, even on a mini golf course. And speaking of surprises, this last thing from the episode totally blew my mind. Ready for this?
Hey, me with it.
Okay, so World War II history, but not the stuff you learned in school. We're talking German U-boats right off the coast.
Yeah.
And even German POWs, like living and working with the locals.
Whoa, hold on. German POWs in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah. So apparently right after D-Day, huge labor shortage, right? The war effort and everything. So they brought in German POWs to like fill those jobs. Crazy. Right?
It makes you think about like how complicated war really is.
Yeah.
And what happens after, one day they're the enemy, the next day they're your neighbor helping to rebuild.
Exactly. And it shows you never really know a place until you like really dig into it. We started this whole deep dive thinking we knew Myrtle Beach, right? Sun, sand, maybe some golf. But we found so much more. Hidden history, those passions you don't expect, and a community that just keeps changing.
It makes you think, what else is out there? What haven't we discovered yet?
Exactly. And that is why we do these deep dives. So if anything we talked about today made you curious, check out the show notes for like links and all that. And hey, if you ever go to Myrtle Beach, let us know what you find. Until next time, happy exploring.